When he was young, Michael Parker believed that life was naturally very easy. He was born into a wealthy family. His father, Robert Parker, was a successful businessman. The large mansion where they lived stood in the middle of a bustling city, every morning flooded with golden sunlight shining through the glass windows. Michael lacked nothing: designer clothes, the newest phones, luxury cars, extravagant trips. Whenever he saw something that caught his eye, that stirred a bit of interest, he turned to his father, "Dad, I want this," and almost always Robert would answer, "All right, son." And so, Michael had everything. Friends often advised him, "You have to think about the future, study, and work seriously." But Michael only laughed. "The future? My dad has money, that's enough. Why should I worry every morning when the sun was already high?" Michael lazily opened his eyes. Breakfast was brought straight to his bed. He leaned back, eating while scrolling through his phone, then turned on the TV to watch his favorite shows. Sometimes, he drove out to meet friends, ate together at fancy restaurants, dressed in glamorous clothes, raced cars down the streets, and let the wind blow through his hair. Michael thought life was truly perfect, easy, fun, and that it would always stay that way. He never thought about money, never thought about work. When he wanted to travel, he traveled. When he wanted new shoes, he bought them. When he wanted a phone, he chose the most expensive one. His father paid for everything. Michael never asked what his father had to do to earn that money. He didn't care about the company, didn't care about effort, and only knew how to enjoy each day. One afternoon, when the sunlight in the garden had turned a deep golden hue, Robert called Michael over, his voice unusual. "Michael, sit down. I want to talk to you." Michael smirked, still carefree. "Yes, Dad." "What is it?" But his father's face bore no smile. He was silent, his eyes stern. Michael suddenly felt his heart tremble slightly. "Son," Robert said slowly, "you are no longer a child. You need to think about your own future." Michael laughed. "Future, I already have everything." "Why worry?" Robert shook his head, his tone firm. "No. Michael, you have everything because I work. But life is never only easy. One day, everything will change." Michael frowned. He thought his father was just being pessimistic, worrying for nothing. He smiled, waving his hand. "Don't worry, Dad. Nothing will change." But his father did not smile. He looked straight into his son's eyes, his gaze deep, heavy with something Michael had never understood. Then he only said 4 words, "We shall see." The young man left the room, not thinking much of it. To him, his father was simply in a bad mood. So that night, Michael still went out, partied with friends, and spent money like water. But he didn't know. His father's words had already planted a seed inside him, ready to grow into a great change. The next morning, Michael woke up late again. He picked up his phone and saw a flood of messages from friends. "Let's hang out. Today. A new place is opening." Michael laughed gleefully, sprayed expensive cologne, put on a stylish outfit, and headed downstairs. But there, Robert was already waiting. His face was still stern. "Sit down," he said. Michael sighed, annoyed. "Dad, I have plans today. My friends are waiting." "Sit down," his father repeated, his tone leaving no room for defiance. Michael reluctantly sat. Robert looked him straight in the eye. "You think you know about life, but you are wrong. You don't know anything yet." Michael frowned. "Trying to argue, Dad. I do know. I live happily, joyfully. Isn't that what life is? Robert shook his head, even more serious. No, Michael. That is only an illusion. You need to see the truth. Then suddenly, he stood up, saying only one sentence. Come with me. Michael was surprised, but he followed. Father and son got into the car, on the road, for the first time. Michael noticed the city with different eyes. Crowded streets, workers hurrying to their jobs, some sweeping trash, some carrying goods, some selling quick breakfasts. He had never paid attention to them. But today, everything appeared clearly. The car stopped in an old, unfamiliar neighborhood. The houses were cramped, and the sidewalks were dusty. Robert pointed to a man selling fruit on the street corner. Look, Michael, that man wakes before sunrise, works all day, without complaint, without grumbling. He does it all just to feed his family. Michael was silent. He didn't know how to respond. They kept going. Robert pointed to a small shop, where an old woman sat by a worn sewing machine. She has been stitching for more than 40 years. Though tired, she never stops working, because that is the only way to survive. Michael looked at her, saw her thin hands tirelessly moving the needle, and saw her weary eyes, but never resting. A strange feeling entered his heart. Until now, he had never noticed people like that. Do you see? Robert asked softly. Life is not as easy as you think. Some people exchange sweat and strength every single day, and you haven't worked a single hour in your life. Michael turned his face away, feeling small and lost for the first time. The image of the fruit seller and the old seamstress haunted him. He could not say a word. Inside him, something began to stir, like the first crack in the wall of arrogance. The car rolled on. Michael sat in silence, eyes looking out the window, his mind still in turmoil. He did not expect that this journey was only the beginning, and it would change his whole life. When the car stopped for the third time, Michael realized they were standing in front of a large, imposing building, which was his father's company office. He had been here before, but only in passing, just to ask for money or to pick up a new credit card. He had never once cared about what was inside. Robert stepped out of the car and turned back to look at his son. Come on, Michael. It's time for you to see clearly what I do every day. Michael frowned. All he could think was another long lecture. But still, he followed. The office was bustling, so different from Michael's luxurious world. Employees hurried about, phones rang without pause, papers piled high, faces were tense, eyes were weary, yet all remained focused. Michael stood frozen, astonished. His father led him into a private office, spacious, but far from quiet. Robert sat down in his chair, looked straight at his son, and asked, "Do you know what I do every day?" Michael shrugged. "You work. Sign papers. Talk to people." Robert nodded, then spoke in a stern voice. "Right. But it's more than that. I have to wake up at dawn and handle hundreds of problems. I must take care of the employees, the clients, and this entire company. I carry it all, just so you can have the comfortable life you've never once valued." Michael stayed silent. For the first time, he felt an unpleasant stirring of guilt. Then Robert pulled a small notebook from his drawer and placed it before his son. "Tomorrow, you begin working here. From the lowest position, you will learn from the start." Michael burst out laughing, half surprised, half scornful. "Me. Work. Are you kidding? I don't need to work." But Robert didn't laugh. He said each word firmly. "Yes, you need to. Because one day, I won't be here anymore. And then, What will become of you? The question struck Michael speechless. He had never thought about the day his father would no longer be in his life. Everything inside him suddenly swayed. The next morning, the alarm rang at first light. Michael rubbed his eyes, exhausted. His habit of sleeping in made waking up early pure torment. But he had no choice. When he came downstairs, his father was already waiting, and a small bag was placed on the table. "This is your lunch." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Can't I eat at a restaurant? I'm used to that." "No. Today, you are a worker, and they bring lunch boxes." He swallowed hard, grabbed the bag, and stepped out the door with a heavy heart. That day at the office, he wasn't led into his father's grand room. Instead, Robert took him to a small space crowded with desks and the sound of clacking keyboards. There, a stern-faced man with glasses walked up. "This is William," Robert said. "From today, you'll work under his guidance." Then he left, leaving Michael to face reality. William handed him a thick stack of papers. "Sit down, check the figures, mark the errors. Work fast." Michael's eyes widened at the pile. All of this?" William nodded without expression. "All of it." "Start now." Michael reluctantly sat down. At first he thought easy, just numbers. But an hour later, his eyes blurred, his head buzzed. The numbers danced chaotically. Around him, everyone stayed focused, working non-stop. No chatting, no breaks. At noon, Michael opened his lunch bag. Inside were just a few slices of bread, some cold cuts, and a small bottle of water, plain and ordinary. He looked around, and every employee was eating similar, simple meals. They ate quickly, exchanged brief words, then returned to their desks. Michael bit into the bread and sighed. He longed for lavish meals and expensive drinks. Yet, at the same time, a strange feeling stirred in him respect. The afternoon was even harder. His back ached, his hands throbbed. When William checked his work, he frowned. Too many mistakes. Do it again. Michael burned with frustration, wanting to argue, but one glance at William's cold eyes silenced him. He simply nodded and started over. By the end of the day, Michael staggered out, body drained. But for the first time, he felt something different. Tired, yet meaningful. As if he had just stepped into the real world. His father was waiting outside. Without many words, Robert simply smiled. Michael found himself smiling back, the first smile he had truly earned. Not bought with his father's money. The days that followed brought challenge after challenge. On the second day, William remarked coldly, "Yesterday you were too slow. Today, be faster." Michael gritted his teeth and pressed on. He worked, corrected errors, and made fewer mistakes than before. At day's end, William only said 2 words. Better. Those 2 words filled Michael with joy that was greater than receiving any luxury gift. On the 3rd day, William set an even larger stack of documents on his desk. "Let's see if you can handle this." Michael was exhausted, but he bent over the work. His back ached, his eyes strained, his hands trembled. But he didn't quit. Now, he wanted to prove that he could not just do it to his father, but also to himself. And so the days went by. Outside, his friends' mocking voices echoed, "You working." That's hilarious, but Michael didn't answer. Inside, he was changing, slowly, but surely. And then, the second turning point drew near when the conflict would reach its peak, when he would be forced to face his true limits. As time went by, Michael gradually adapted to the new rhythm. The early days of sluggishness and exhaustion turned into a habit. He learned to wake up early, to have a light breakfast, and to arrive at the office on time. And more importantly, he began to learn how to listen. However, the change did not necessarily make everything easy. After a few weeks, William gave Michael a new assignment: prepare an important financial report to present in a major meeting. This was the third challenge, and also the hardest. Michael looked at the massive stack of documents, his heart trembling. He thought, I cannot do this. Too much. Too difficult. But then, the image of the fruit seller, the old woman sewing, and his father's stern gaze came back to him. He took a deep breath and began. On the first day, Michael worked hunched over until late at night. The tangled numbers made his head spin. On the second day, he made a serious mistake, prompting William to shout loudly, "Do you think this is a game? If the report is wrong, the company will lose millions of dollars. Do it again." From the beginning, Michael froze. Shame surrounded him. He had intended to give up, to walk out of the office and return to his easy life. But when he stepped into the hallway, he saw his father standing there. His father said nothing, only looked at him. In that gaze, there was no anger, only hope. Michael turned back, sat at the desk, and started rewriting from scratch. This time, he was more patient and more careful. Night fell, and everyone else had gone home. Only the yellow light shone on his tired face. He thought, this is the first time I am working for myself. The day of the meeting arrived. Michael walked into the room, trembling, holding the report in his hands. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. William sat at the back, his father at the head of the table. He presented each number, each chart. At first his voice shook, but it gradually grew steady. When he finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds. Then applause erupted. William nodded, for the first time allowing a faint smile. All right, not bad. His father did not say much. He only looked at his son, his eyes shimmering with pride. That evening, Mr. Robert called Michael into a private room. On the table, he placed a small key. "Michael," he said slowly, "you have changed. I can see it. You are no longer a child living in illusions. You have learned what it means to work, what true value means." Michael took the key, his hands trembling. "What is this?" "Father, this is the key to your new office. Not big, but it is yours. Starting tomorrow, you will not only be an employee, but you will also learn how to lead." He clenched the key tightly, feeling its weight, yet also its meaning. It was not just metal, but the trust his father had given him. From then on, Michael stepped into a new journey. He no longer sought joy in luxurious clothes or expensive cars. Instead, he found happiness in every short compliment. "Better, good job, well done." Those words, simple as they were, carried more value than any lavish gift. Michael began to understand his father more. He understood the sleepless nights, the unspoken worries. He clearly saw that his father was not just a man with money, but a man who had built an entire world with his hands and his mind. Once, when the two of them stood on the company balcony, looking down at the hurried crowd, Michael quietly said, "Father, I am sorry. I was so foolish before." "Mr. Robert smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "No, Michael, what matters is that you have changed. That is what I wished for." Looking back, Michael laughed when he remembered his old self, the boy who thought life was only about sleeping in, spending money, and having fun. Now he knew life was not easy, Life was labor, effort, and building each brick for the future. That lesson his father had given him, not through words, but through actions, challenges, and the deep love of a father for his son. And now, Michael no longer feared the day his father would no longer be by his side, because he had learned how to stand firm with his own 2 hands.